Hey folks, Jamie Lundell here. I just wanted to talk to you today a little bit more about Damascus. We're going to kind of continue on that adventure. What we're going to be doing is going over the Campfire Damascus that I did fairly recently. And we're going to be making some of that, but a slightly modified version of it. So the biggest thing about the Campfire is that we needed to basically make a shaded Damascus where we're starting out with one layer of, I think I'm starting out with one layer of 10 series, so 1075, then one layer of 15N20, and then doubling the thickness of both of those, and then just continuing to add to that. And so I have my billet. It's a pretty big one laid out here, and you can see that I've kind of colored in the 10 series so that way you can kind of see the progression. And I end with a lot of the 10 series at the end here. And so what that's going to do is that's going to isolate the flames, so that it'll kind of, the bright part of the flames will exist here, and then there'll be a dark border to the end of it. So I have everything stacked up here. I'm going to get it TIG welded, so I'll weld a couple of lines here, and then I'll also weld on my faces and bring this down to a square, and then once it's square, I'll crush it down. So I'm going to forge in my corners by quite a bit, and then compress that down to create my W's. And from there, we're going to then cut and restack. But we're going to get this welded, and then once it is, we'll go over to the hammer and get working. All right, so I have my billet all welded up. So I have 3 lines on either side, and then I like doing an X on the end because you want to do something here so that things don't just start peeling away on you. So now we're good to go. This guy goes in the fire, and once it comes up to heat, I'm going to put on a 5-minute timer and give it that 5-minute soak. Then we're going to go under the hammer and get this weld set. dicey. All right, so I have about 18.5 inches of usable material in this bar, so it's a significant amount. I'll divide that up. I think I'm going to cut it into 4 pieces and then restack that way and then move on from there. But for right now, I'll show you what we're looking like currently. So, you know, we have that larger area, you know, up here that's going to be the dark, and then these are our bright layers. So right now it's looking pretty good. We got it crushed down pretty well into some pretty good C's, and now it's just moving forward from there. All right, so now that I have my billet all ready, I mean, we've looked at the end, we like what we see. I'm going to use the hard wheel to go ahead and clean up the scale on the top and bottom. Then we're going to divide it up into those 4 pieces. TIG weld all the sides together and the front and back. Make sure those are nice and sealed up. And then from there, can commence with the restack weld. Both sides of this guy cleaned up, and you can see that I didn't go crazy getting it cleaned up. I got it pretty well cleaned up, but you know, there's still a couple of lines here and there. I don't know if you can see, I'm just knocking everything over with a handle. Still a couple lines here and there, maybe a spot here or there. I got the majority of the big stuff out, and that's the important part. You can leave a little bit. You don't need to go crazy. You don't need to really thin everything out to the last shiny bit, because as you sit for that 5-minute soak, you're getting decarb. That carbon is like outgassing into the small space in between the welds, and that carbon is picking up, bonding with the oxygen from the iron oxide and cleaning the surface. So as long as you're not, you don't have a crazy amount of oxides in there, everything's going to be just fine. So now I got to do some math, divide this bar by 4. I'll get it cut, and then I'm going to etch all my ends so that I can make sure that I line up my end grain. So we have everything cut up, and I have etched my surfaces. So now it's just making sure everything gets aligned properly. So like we can look at this top, and you know, right around there's seeming like it's decent. On this side it looks like it's a little bit off. On this side It's looking pretty good. You know, you want to make sure that you flip things around and you get everything to line up the best that it possibly can. So let's see here. So now when we look at this, you can see as that all those lines are going to line up, and that's the important part. You got to make sure everything lines up. If things are, you know, over here and then they're slightly out, make sure that you go ahead and flip everything and get it all lined up now, because once that weld happens, then you're stuck with what you got. And it's always worth double checking before you go ahead and get the weld, because I've been on the receiving end of whoops, I didn't mean to do it that way, and it's no fun, especially when once you put a lot of effort in, your third or fourth weld in, and then you reverse a tile, is no fun. So always double and triple check. Got this guy all welded up, and now it's time to go into the forge to forge weld it all down and draw it out so that we can cut and restack one more time. Took a little trimming off the end, and so you can see where we're at. You can see that some of my lines don't line up perfectly. This is one of the advantages of doing like a crush W kind of pattern. If things don't quite line up perfectly, like you can see down in this end here, one of my layers didn't quite line up. But since we're going to layer this up again, it's just going to give it more of a jagged appearance, and it'll be all right. So it always frustrates me when my lines don't line up, but you know, you do the best you can. And the fact that it is, like I said, the crushed W's, and the end is going to go on a bias, all of that will help kind of mask how those lines don't quite line up. I think the most important part is that my big dark line on my edge has a pretty consistent alignment, and that's going to be the outside of the fire, so that'll all be up. And so as long as that stays pretty close together, I think it's going to continue to give a fairly convincing look. So yeah, we'll see how it all goes. That we're at this point, it's going to be restacking again. So I got to go and clean up my bars, and then do another stack of 4 tall, and that'll be, well, actually I'm going to go 3 tall this time. And from there, we're going to bias, so everything will start going diagonally, and then those will get book matched. So we are 2 welds away from the end. We're getting there. All right, so we're about ready to go back under the hammer. I have my billet all welded up. I'm not sure how well you can see this, but I lined up all 3 of my cuts, and yeah, ready to go and get this welded. Once we do that, then we are going to forge it out on the bias so that it can then get book matched, and that will make our campfires. So second to last weld before we are done making the tile. Hey guys, so we went through, we re-squared our material, so basically all of those W's that were going up are now going diagonally. Let's see here if I can get a good view of what's going on. So you can see how those W's now travel diagonally. And all of this corner here, this is all the 1075, so that's going to end up being dark. So now I'm going to book match it, so this face. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to clean up this face of the rest of the bar, and then book match it, and then weld it together just from that side. And then at that point, we'll have our campfires. So it's just one more round of cleaning up and one more weld. And this tile will be done. So yeah, back to the grinder, and then we'll go back into the forge. All right. So we have our restack. You can see I got some. You can see some of that pattern in there. This is our last weld. So this is the book match. So now we're just going to get this together. We're going to forge this down to a square, and then take a look at it from there. We might, you know, that way we can do some other manipulations from there if we want to. But that square will then be our campfire pattern. And so that would be the tile that we're looking for. So into the forge, and one more weld. So this is our campfire pattern. Feel like I didn't get it quite as pointy as I have in the past, but I would say it's still a pretty successful go at it. Let's see, get a good look. There we go. And so now from here, this can get tiled out side by side, or you could book match it end to end, and that would create some of that kind of like diamond pattern that a lot of people utilize. Yeah, there's plenty of ways to go with it from here. But this is kind of the basic building block of creating something a little bit more elaborate. So I hope that was informative, and if you guys have any questions about things, leave them in the comments. Any other patterns you want me to explore, also just let me know, and we'll go ahead and make that happen.